It began on a day like any other, the sun scraping gently against the terracotta rooftops of the Sahel village, wind hushing secrets through market stalls where Traoré moved with practiced ease, unaware that history, long buried beneath layers of silence and sand, was waiting to rip itself free through the most fragile of carriers, a thin roll of brittle parchment tucked behind a false wall in the colonial records room, left untouched for decades and guarded by nothing but obscurity. Traoré, whose grandfather had vanished mysteriously during the independence movement, and whose family bore the weight of unanswered questions for generations, had come searching for an old permit tied to land disputes, but the crack in the masonry, just a faint outline visible only from a certain angle in the dustlight, pulled him toward something infinitely larger, something pulsing with time's defiance, and when his fingers curled around the dry roll and unwrapped it beneath a flickering bulb, what he saw made the breath in his lungs turn cold. It was a map, dated 1955, hand-inked by a French cartographer, detailing not only the resource lines that sliced through the region like veins of blood, but annotations in red ink, signed by intelligence officers explicitly marking areas of exploitation, relocation zones for entire villages, and prearranged plans with complicit local chiefs, a system of displacement disguised as development, of loyalty bought and sold with guns and salt, of truths replaced with official silences and rewritten textbooks. At first, Traoré stared, stunned, not fully able to process the implications. His own village marked with an X, a date scrawled beneath it matching the week his grandfather was declared missing, along with notes in code that, when cross-referenced with reports in the state archive, matched the euphemisms used for enforced disappearances: relocated for protection, transferred to metropolitan supervision, absentee land seizure authorized. And his hands trembled, not just from the document's revelation, but from the collision of lived myth and recorded betrayal, as though the stories whispered by elders under moonlight, dismissed for years as folklore, had stood vindicated in this single, crumbling artifact. He didn't go home that night. Instead, he pored over the map in a hostel room by candlelight, tracing borders with fingertips, comparing notes, constructing a grid of falsified timelines, and as dawn crept through the curtains, he realized the scale of the deception. Dozens of villages redrawn, ecosystems fractured, resources extracted with surgical precision under the guise of partnership and infrastructure. His people reduced to logistics, the soil beneath his childhood playfields once earmarked for rare earth mineral extraction, contracts signed in Brussels and Algiers decades before his birth, and even the revolutionary heroes his schoolbooks had deified now stood compromised by annotations showing secret meetings, foreign account numbers, and plans for manufactured uprisings to justify land seizures. Rage swelled like a fever in his chest, but with it came clarity. This was no longer about his grandfather alone. It was about a generational truth buried beneath bureaucracy, and if he could expose it, he could awaken something deeper than anger. Memory sharpened into resistance. He returned to the archives, now burning with purpose, photographing documents, cross-referencing files under fake researcher identities, working late into the night stitching together a chronology of conspiracy so dense it read like fiction, until he stumbled upon a folder labeled Operation Celine, hidden within a misclassified diplomatic pouch, inside which lay correspondence between former governors and present-day officials, proving not only that the operation had never ended, but had evolved into a quiet digital campaign to erase remaining indigenous records and align the national curriculum to fit sanitized narratives. With a nausea that made his knees weak, Traoré realized he had uncovered not history, but a living wound still being sutured with lies, and as he stared out the window toward the red hills where his ancestors once hunted, he knew silence was no longer an option. In the following days, he began leaking documents online anonymously, using encrypted networks, ghost accounts, forums frequented by scholars and diaspora activists, each new revelation a hammer against the edifice of comfortable national myths. Newspapers hesitated, fearing state reprisal, but citizen journalists amplified his findings, and what began as whispers soon turned into rallies, community meetings, intergenerational discussions in village squares where elders wept as they read their past rendered visible for the first time in 70 years. School children learned that the names of rivers had been changed to erase their original meanings, that certain songs were outlawed not for their lyrics, but for the memories they stirred, and everywhere, the lie began to unravel, not in one grand explosion, but in thousands of small reckonings until finally the government responded. A denial at first, then an investigation, and eventually, a televised acknowledgement that decades of discrepancies existed, though never quite admitting intent. But Traoré's name was out now, outed by a betrayed confidant or an intercepted message, and the government labeled him a radical, a fabricator, even as international historians confirmed the document's authenticity. He was forced into hiding, moved between safe houses. But from those shadows he watched as statues were quietly removed, plaques rewritten, and young voices at universities began citing his work. Not as subversion, but as awakening. The map, once hidden behind a wall, had become a symbol, printed on banners, murals, curriculum covers, even clothing, a quiet rebellion worn in plain sight. As time passed, Traoré's story morphed from mystery to legend, yet the truth never dulled. He had cracked open the silence not through violence or spectacle but with evidence, plain, dusty, damning. Elders who once feared remembering began speaking, archiving, documenting their truths, and the country, though never offering full restitution, began shifting its axis. Foreign partners who had profited from the lie distanced themselves, offered platitudes, but the people remembered, and that memory was power. The fields once mined were reclaimed, not in law perhaps, but in song and story, and the names of those lost, like Traoré's grandfather, were carved onto memorials no government could tear down. He never returned to a normal life. Exile became his routine, his voice scattered across interviews, underground lectures, holograms beamed into classrooms, but his mission endured. Not to be a martyr, but a messenger. For every map hidden behind a wall, there were 10 more waiting to be found. Every generation, he believed, deserved the right to know who had drawn their borders, and why. In time, Traoré's archive became a foundation, a center for suppressed memory, and when new lies emerged in different forms, it was his model that others followed. Study, find, expose, teach, remember. Even now, decades after the day he first touched the brittle map and felt its weight pull history into his hands, the story continues, not as a conclusion, but as a warning, a flame carried across timelines. That silence, however thick, can be torn open by one truth-bearer willing to look too closely, to ask too much, and to risk everything for the possibility that buried beneath the layers of propaganda, paperwork, and pain lies a map, not of geography but of conscience, and whoever finds it, if brave enough to trace its lines, will see not just a lie undone, but a future rewritten by those who remember what was stolen and dare to reclaim it aloud.